Hello, my name is Dr. Tim Bradshaw, and I am the instructor for this course, Basic Anatomy and Physiology, BSc 1084C, and this is our first lecture. Welcome and congratulations on getting through your first week. Hopefully by now you have been able to find our syllabus and our schedule under the course tab in PAL. If you have any questions about how the course is run, please ask either on the discussion board or send me an email. Today we are going to start our first lecture, which is an introduction to anatomy and physiology. Our goals for today are reviewing what we mean by anatomy and physiology, looking at the different structural levels of the human body. We're going to take a look at what we need in order to be considered alive, what characteristics define life, as well as what we as humans, as well as other organisms, need in order to survive. Then we're going to look at a very important concept in an anatomy and physiology course called homeostasis. We're going to define homeostasis and look at how we control it through different feedback mechanisms. So what is anatomy and physiology? What is this course that you were enrolled in? Anatomy is essentially what we are made of. It's the study of the structure and shape of the body and all its parts. So all your organs and all your tissues and all your cells, how they're all linked together is the study of anatomy. Physiology is the study of how the body actually works. So how does your heart pump blood, and how does your small intestine move food through it? And in order to really understand anatomy, you have to know physiology, and vice versa. You can't understand how the body works unless you know how it's put together. We're going to break anatomy down into two big concepts. We have gross anatomy and microscopic anatomy. In gross anatomy, we're thinking about large structures that we can see with your naked eye. Right, so for instance, studying the heart as a whole would be an example of gross anatomy. Studying the liver or the pancreas, things like this. Microscopic anatomy, like the name says, are things that you can only see with a microscope. Here we're talking about a level of detail at the cellular level or the tissue level. And we can break microscopic anatomy into two types, cytology and histology. Cytology is the study of cells, looking at how individual cells function and work together. And histology is the study of tissues. So now I want you to take a look at this slide and just spend a minute or so. You can pause the narration if you'd like and try to determine what does this slide show? What is the reason we have this slide in this PowerPoint? Okay, once you've done that, once you've paused it and then restarted, let's talk about this. What this shows, down at number 6, we see a human, a whole organism. And you have to wonder, what is this person made of? What makes up a human? Well, we are made of different organ systems. We have 11 total organ systems that we find in our bodies. And each organ system is made of a different set of organs. Alright, so we have something like the cardiovascular system, which consists of the heart and the blood vessels. We have the respiratory system, which consists of the lungs, the trachea, and all the associated vessels therein. So we have organ systems made of organs. So what is an organ? Well, an organ, as we work our way smaller and smaller in our chart here, organs are made of different types of tissues. So we see at number 4 here on the organ level, we have a blood vessel. And that blood vessel consists of 3 different types of tissues. Epithelial tissue, smooth muscle tissue, and connective tissue. Now these terms might not make sense to us yet, but that's okay. The point here is to notice that an organ is made of different types of tissue all working together. So that asks the question then, what is a tissue? A tissue is just a group of similar cells all working together to perform a function. So we have something like smooth muscle tissue or skeletal muscle tissue, all made of different types of cells working together. Now, a cell itself is also a functional unit. It's made of different types of molecules. So each cell is made of a lot of different things working together, and we'll talk about cells here in a few lectures. Molecules are made up of atoms, and this gets into more of a chemistry side of life, and we'll discuss chemistry in a future lecture as well. So what this slide is showing us is how the human body is constructed of a bunch of different parts, each of those parts working together, and each made up of smaller parts. This slide is in the PowerPoint to show us that these organ systems in our body all work together. They're all interdependent on one another. You can't have something working in isolation of something else. So we have the respiratory system bringing in oxygen and taking out carbon dioxide. We see that in the top right of our slide here. But as it brings in oxygen, it has to put it somewhere. It's going to put it into the blood, which is moved around the body through the cardiovascular system. So everything works in conjunction to create a living organism. Moving on, we're going to think about what does it take to be alive. If you went to a, let's say a distant planet, and you found something laying on the ground and you weren't sure, is this thing alive or is it non-living? Is it like a rock or something like that? Or is it an actual living creature? Well, there are things that we say you have to be able to do in order to be considered alive. Right? We have 8 necessary life functions that all living things have to demonstrate in order to be considered alive. We also have 5 survival needs. These are slightly different. These are things that you need to have in order to survive. So life functions are things you need to be able to do. Survival needs are things you need to be able to have in order to survive. Okay? So I'd like you to pause the narration here as well and try to think. Maybe write down on a piece of paper, what do you think you would need to have in order to survive? Could not live without. And what does your body need to be able to do in order to be considered alive? Once you have your list, as many as you can possibly come up with, go ahead and play the narration again and we'll look at these things. Okay, welcome back. Here we're looking at the necessary life functions that if you want to be alive, you have to be able to do these things. So first we have maintaining boundaries between internal and external environments via plasma membranes and skin. This is essentially homeostasis, that term that I mentioned earlier on. In homeostasis, you keep the outside from affecting your insides, essentially. You maintain these boundaries either through the skin of the cell or through your actual skin of your body. So if the temperature in the room goes up really, really high, your internal temperature won't change as much. Your body has to maintain a normal environment inside of itself, or else you're going to have a lot of problems. Number 2, movement. Things that are living can move around and also move substances through their body. So we think about us, we can get up and walk around, and we can also transport nutrients and oxygen and things like that throughout our body. Other living things, while it might not look like they can move as much, say for instance a tree doesn't get up and walk around, they can move things throughout their body. They can transport nutrients and water and things like that from their roots up to the top of the tree. So they would still be considered alive. A rock, for instance, could not do this. It could not move voluntarily. Responsiveness, number 3. The ability to sense and respond to stimuli. Living things, if there's a stimuli coming at them, say, a charging lion or something like that, they can move out of the way. They can respond to that stimulus. Digestion. Living things can break down food or other types of nutrients and deliver it to where it's needed inside their body. Number 5 is related to digestion. Number 5 is metabolism, and this refers to all the chemical reactions that occur in body cells. So for instance, being able to take food into a cell and then utilize the nutrients and the parts of the food in order to have something in order to make energy or something like that. Number 6, also related to digestion and metabolism, is excretion. You have byproducts and waste materials from metabolism and digestion, and you can excrete these, get rid of them, remove them from your body. Number 7, living things can reproduce, not only divide their cells and grow larger, but also pass on their genetic information to their offspring. And lastly, we have number 8, growth. Living things can grow larger, increase both in number of cells and in total size. Survival needs are usually easier to figure out. Right? What do you need in order to keep living? Well, you need nutrients. Number 1, you need food. Without food, you wouldn't survive. Okay? And these are used to supply your body so you can grow and develop energy for your use. Number 2, you need oxygen. We breathe in oxygen, not because we want to breathe, but because we actually need oxygen in order to form energy. ATP production, under number 2, is a form of energy currency that we use in our body, and we'll talk about this more later. Your 3rd survival need is water. You are made of a lot of water. Our bodies are 60 to 80% body weight, and this is where we find most of the chemical reactions that occur during metabolism are occurring in a watery environment. Without water in our bodies, we will not be able to do any of the metabolic processes that need to occur for us to stay alive. Number 4 under survival needs is normal body temperature. You need to maintain a body temperature, otherwise chemical reactions occurring during metabolism will not function. And lastly, you need appropriate atmospheric pressure, otherwise you wouldn't be able to move air in and out of your lungs. And we'll talk about respiration when we get to our respiratory chapter later in the semester, and this will make more sense then, hopefully. Alright, now we're going to move on to this big concept that I alluded to earlier called homeostasis, an underlying theme throughout all of physiology and anatomy. Homeostasis, as it says on the slide, maintenance of a relatively stable internal environment despite continuous outside changes. Essentially, all of your body systems, all of your organ systems work to maintain a stable playing field inside your body and not have excessive changes occur despite fluctuations that are occurring outside of your body. Okay? So really the main goal of your body systems, of your cardiovascular system, your respiratory system, your urinary system, are to keep your body at a normal equilibrium without a lot of changes occurring. Changes lead to disease or death. So how does our body do this? How do we maintain this constant environment? Because our world is constantly changing. We walk outside and it's hot outside. We jump in the ocean and now we have a lot of salt and water on our skin. How do we keep from changing our internal environment in this very changing external world? Well, your body has control centers designed to do this. Okay? And this is a slide of a generic control system. It's like the thermostat in your house or your apartment. think about it, if your thermostat is set at, let's say, 75 degrees, if the temperature goes up too much, goes to 80 for some reason, maybe you open some doors and it's hot outside, if the temperature goes up very much, then a receptor or a sensor in your thermostat will detect that. And it will say, it is getting a little too hot in here. It's going to send that signal to a control center. The control center will say, the set point is 75 or whatever our set point is. 80 is higher than that. We need to fix this problem. It then sends a signal. The control center sends a signal to an effector to fix the problem. So the effector will, if it's a thermostat in your house, it's going to turn on the air and have the temperature go lower. This is the same description of how a mechanism like this would work, although now we have a cartoon image. So we start off with number 1. A stimulus produces a change in a variable. And if we're talking about temperature, this would be something like it starts to become hot outside. A receptor is going to detect that change. In our bodies, we have thermal receptors in our skin that tell us if we're getting warm or cold. That receptor is going to send that signal to our control center. Generally, for humans and for other organisms, our control center is usually our brain. In your brain, you have a set point, a specific temperature that your body wants to maintain. If you deviate from that set point, if you change from it a little too much, you're going to activate the control center, which is going to say, let's fix this problem. It's going to send a signal to the effector to fix the problem. In humans, if we get too warm, the effector would cause us to sweat, because sweating will help cool you off. We have 2 types of control mechanisms. We have negative feedback and positive feedback. In a negative feedback system, you have an initial stimulus, and then the response of the control mechanism is to oppose that stimulus. So for instance, if we're talking about temperature, if your temperature is going up, that's your stimulus. The negative feedback response would be to make temperature go back down. Okay? So it's going to do basically the opposite of what the stimulus is trying to do. In positive feedback, we have a stimulus occur, and then the response would be to increase the effect of that stimulus. This doesn't happen as often. Most of the time, negative feedback is the mechanism that our bodies use. But in some special instances, like going through labor contractions or trying to clot your blood, we use a positive feedback mechanism. You can imagine this would be a very dangerous thing to use a positive feedback if we wanted to control, say, temperature. If it was under a positive system, if temperature goes up, the response would then be to cause it to go up even more. And eventually we would be so hot that we wouldn't be able to survive. So temperature and most other systems in our body are controlled through negative feedback. Here's an image of a negative feedback mechanism. You can read through all the different parts of this pathway. But what we see is a stimulus, either body temperature going up or going down. We see the receptor that detects that. That sends a signal to the control center in our brain. The control center realizes there's a problem, and then it sends an instruction to the effector to fix the problem. The effector, if we're too hot, would be to sweat, so we can cool off. If we're too cold, the effector would be to shiver, so we can warm up. In both, the effect is going to oppose the initial stimulus. So if the stimulus was body temperature went up, then the effect would be bring body temperature down, and vice versa. Here's one example of positive feedback. Remember, in positive feedback, you have a stimulus, and then the response by the effector is going to amplify that stimulus or increase that stimulus. So in this example, we have a tear in a blood vessel, and we're bleeding out of this blood vessel, and so we want to create a clot. We have a receptor that would identify this, and then it would send a signal to cause platelets to come to the site. Platelets are little fragments in your blood that will eventually stick together and form a clot. When they reach the site, platelets will release chemicals which attract other platelets. And then those new platelets release more chemicals which attract more platelets. And you can see we have this sort of loop going on, where more platelets arrive, release chemicals, and then more platelets arrive and release more chemicals. Eventually, enough platelets arrive to where we can actually plug our clot, or plug our tear. If this was under negative feedback, once the first platelets arrived, that would stop the arrival of more platelets. Obviously, you wouldn't be able to plug a tear in your blood vessel that way. Alright, that's the end of our first lecture. I appreciate you listening. I would suggest reading through or looking through our slides. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'm trying to get the links posted on for our labs as well, and hopefully those will be up soon. But look through all the materials, and if you have any questions, let me know. There will be more information about future exams and things like that coming up. And I wish you all the best, and looking forward to a wonderful semester. And thank all of you who have already participated in our discussion boards. If you haven't done so, please introduce yourself on the first discussion board. The week ends on Sunday. You need to have all your posts made by then, because starting Monday we'll start week 2. All right, thank you everyone. Have a wonderful day.